Technology has brought about many innovations, and those innovations have resulted in many great things. But these great innovations have a downside: hyper-individualism. More and more people are focusing only on themselves, how much money they have, and what's directly in front of them. This unfortunately creates lonely people, but what is a lonely person to do when they live in a society that tells them that they're worth nothing if they're not in a relationship? They want to find love, but the issue is their attention is only focused on themselves and their phones, and their time is limited. So, what is the solution? Hi, guys, welcome back, or welcome to Lily's Little Life Corner, where I, your host Lily, talk about all sorts of things with a bit of an armchair psychology perspective. And today we will be talking about the harmful effects of dating apps. This is also a continuation of my last podcast episode, but it is not necessary to listen to or watch the previous episode to understand this one. In fact, I will be repeating a lot of the things I said in the previous episode here. If you're watching on YouTube but want to listen to this episode with your phone turned off and you don't want to pay for YouTube Premium, please remember my episodes are also available to listen to on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The link will be in the description as always. My usual disclaimer applies here too. I'm not a psychologist, I'm just a psychology enthusiast, but in every episode I do my best to research each topic thoroughly. As always, all of the articles I used and referenced will be linked in the show notes and in the description in case you want to read along. Another disclaimer also applies here. This episode won't get too deep into the psychology. That is reserved for my next episode where I conclude this sort of dating app series. This episode is mostly just about how dating apps suck and why they suck, if you've ever wondered. Also, I'm sorry for the late uploads. I'll update at the end of the episode, but long story short, I had a concussion and this took so long to research. But anyway, buckle in because I have a lot to say. Online dating apps have been around for over a decade, and online dating websites have been around for even longer, with Match.com launching in 1995, 3 years before Google launched. They were made to facilitate finding love and to connect people from all over the world. But over the last decade, dating apps have become more and more prevalent in our lives, with 53% of young adults under 30 in the United States reporting having used a dating app at one point or another. And this is according to the Pew Research Center, who conducted a study among 6,034 diverse US adults in July of 2022. Tinder alone had 75 million monthly active users in 2023, I'm assuming worldwide, with 10.4 million of those having a subscription to Tinder Premium, and it's only growing more and more over the years. Let me get into some statistics straight from the Pew Research Center so we can understand just how many adults are on dating apps. This will be just a little bit boring, but it's important, so I hope you stay. Now, of course, this comes with its own disclaimer. This study was conducted in the United States and is not representative of everyone all over the world. The United States is a gigantic country and has a very diverse population, so chances are that if you live in a smaller and less diverse country, these results will not reflect you and your country. And you probably already learned this in high school math class, but it bears repeating here. Researchers usually only study and question a small group and then make informed estimates as to how the rest of the population will answer. This can result in skewed results, especially if the researchers only study a certain group. Since this particular study is studying Americans in general, there's very little information as to how certain groups of adults use dating apps. They'd have to conduct more studies among only young women or only young adults to understand how dating apps affect each individual community. As such, this podcast episode will be focused on North Americans in general and not on any one specific community in North America. Skews can also happen if the participants of the study weren't honest in their answers, which is also important to note if you are reading through the PRC study, especially when they ask about infidelity. However, the Pew Research Center does a really good job in getting a diverse pool of participants, and you can read more about their process in the studies I will have linked below. Anyway, the Pew Research Center also found that Tinder was the most popular among those that were questioned, with 46% saying they have used Tinder, and that's nearly half of everyone questioned. It was also found that adults 18 to 29 preferred using Tinder over other dating apps like Bumble, Grindr, and Her. The same study found that about 35% of adults who have used a dating app have also paid for the premium features of whatever app they used. This typically includes seeing who liked you or who swiped right on you, boosting your likes so whoever you liked is more likely to, notice you. And Bumble and Tinder allow you to see if the person you message has read your messages. The Pew Research Center conducted another study in October of 2019, this time asking 4,680 different US adults. Their goal was to understand how the dating scene had changed in recent years. They found that roughly 6 in 10 online daters say their overall experience has been positive. However, they also found that, quote, the way people assess their online dating experiences varies widely by socioeconomic factors, end quote. And then they go on to say that the participants who had a bachelor's or advanced degree were more likely to have a positive experience, while those with only a high school diploma or a GED had a more difficult time on dating apps. 9% of everyone interviewed said their experiences were notably negative. Similarly, those who had more money had a better experience than those who had less money. But how do users feel on dating apps? Well, in that same 2019 PRC study, 45% of users said dating apps made them feel frustrated. 35% said that the apps made them feel pessimistic, and another 25% said they felt insecure. 6 in 10 men, or 57% of men, said they felt they didn't get enough messages, whereas 30% of women felt they received too many messages. Additionally, 48% of users say receiving sexually explicit messages or images when they didn't ask for that was very common. You've probably heard horror stories from your friends or family members telling you how they got scammed or how they got sexually explicit messages too early. Rin themselves, in the last episode, said that they received less than appropriate messages and gone on bad dates. This is a very common occurrence on dating apps. Entire horror stories are centered around going on awful dates with matches from dating apps. But surely these apps did not start out being awful. If they did, people wouldn't use them, and they would have gone under in the first few years of their existence. Surely the reason they're popular is because they started out well, but what happened? Why are people having such notably negative experiences? In an NPR article, author Greg Rosowski pointed out that, quote, dating apps aren't alone in seemingly getting worse when they try to make money. In fact, last year, Cory Doctorow coined a term for this pattern, enshittification. Basically, Dr. O says tech platforms start off trying to make their user experiences really good because their first goal is to try to become popular and achieve scale. But over time, they inevitably pursue their ultimate goal of making money, which ends up making the whole user experience enshittified, end quote. This is especially notable in the dating app Hinge, which, according to its own website, is, quote, the dating app designed to be deleted, end quote. Influencers like Cody Ko, who is canceled right now for a very good reason, have had sponsorships with the Hinge app and have emphasized that exact talking point. In fact, it was Cody Ko who inspired me to download the app, thanks to him sharing his own love story. Him and Kelsey, the woman he matched with on Tinder, are now married and with a child. It might not last much longer, but him getting into a long-term relationship was motivation enough for me to download the app. And this was back when I was desperate to date and when I watched Cody Ko, both of which I regret deeply. I was one of the people who did delete the app, but not for the reason that Hinge implies. Hinge's motto and influencers that are sponsored by them imply that the only reason you should delete the app is because you found your perfect other. You found your other half. But I deleted the app because it just wasn't working for me. I got people who I would not have any compatibility with, and this was shown in how dry my conversations were with my matches. Out of Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, Hinge was the worst in my experience. At least on Bumble, I've had longer and more substantial conversations. And for me to say Hinge was worse than Tinder is telling because I didn't even get matches on Tinder before deleting the app and never going back. But you can watch the last episode for the whole story. Rin and I talked about this also in the last episode, but if you guys remember, I said something along the lines of capitalism doesn't allow for apps to be designed to be deleted. And like Rin and I pointed out, we found that Hinge didn't actually show us people who we thought we'd be compatible with. I remember getting matched with several people who played D&D when my profile mentioned nothing of the kind. In fact, even now that I'm in several writing communities, I still haven't played D&D. I don't even know how it works, and I'm not interested in the slightest. And yet, dating apps will still show me people who play D&D when my profile says looking for K-pop friends. In the last episode, I posed the question, how would Hinge get its revenue if all of its users ultimately are deleting the app for good? This episode is sponsored by me, in the loosest sense of the word, because I'm not actually paying myself anything to do this. But I wanted to remind you guys that my Patreon is linked in the description and the show notes. My Patreon is very new, but that is where you will get access to my scripts, and you'll also get access to behind the scenes footage. New videos coming out soon will be a blooper reel, a 25 to 30 minute extra long conversation between Rin and I where we talk about the importance of community and friendships, and vlogs showing you how my setup and process works. Now that I have more time to dedicate to my channel and content creation, I know I'll be able to put more stuff on the Patreon, so please check it out. It is linked in the show notes and in the description. The cheapest tier is $1 a month. Thank you for checking out. If you do, now let's get into the rest of the episode. While the "we'll show you the best matches so you can delete the app forever" approach will work for the first few years. People recommend the app because it works and it actually is designed to be deleted. But in the capitalist society that we live in, businesses can't just rely on new customers. Eventually they run out of new people who want to be in a relationship, especially if the app worked well. So they want to have repeat customers to stay afloat. But what is an app to do when they realize that the customers deleting the app will ultimately be their downfall? According to a lawsuit filed against the Match Group, which owns Bumble, Tinder, and Hinge, the apps use algorithms that are designed to keep you addicted. An AP News article quotes from the lawsuit, quote, "Match intentionally designs its dating platforms with game-like features that lock users into a perpetual pay-to-play loop, prioritizing profit over promises to help users find relationships," end quote. So, whereas before, Hinge's algorithm might have been useful and designed in a way that motivates users to delete the app for good, nowadays they value profit over quality. And this is only further confirmed by one of the PRC studies I mentioned previously, where they point out that although 3 in 10 Americans admitted to using dating apps, only 12% of Americans on dating apps have gotten into long-term committed relationships through the app. And this doesn't tell us how long is considered long-term, or if the couple broke up after being together long-term, or what the percentage of people who broke up after being together long-term is. I don't know if that sentence made any sense, but I think you get what I mean. Furthermore, the AP News article says, quote, "This, the suit claims, turns users into addicts who purchase ever more expensive subscriptions to access special features that promise romance and matches," end quote. And if you watched my previous episode or read through the PRC studies, you'll see that people, myself included, do pay for dating app subscriptions, especially if the user is desperate to date, much like I was. I remember when I first purchased a subscription to Bumble sometime before the pandemic, one of the main reasons behind me feeling okay with buying a monthly subscription was because of the price. There was only one tier and it was only asking me to pay $5 or so a month for all the premium features. You could see who liked you, see who read your messages, but this last time I checked Bumble, more tiers were added and inevitably more pricing options were added. Before I read you the prices, let me tell you what Bumble has to offer per tier. And I'm using Bumble because it's the app that I used most recently, but you can be sure that Tinder and Hinge have similar pricing and tiers since they're owned by the same group. I know Hinge also has a Roses feature, but I wasn't on the app long enough to know how they work. I'm assuming they work similar to how Bumble compliments work, but Hinge users will have to let me know for sure. Anyway, Boost is the cheapest option and gives you 6 extra features than the free version. You get unlimited likes, which apparently you have a limit on how many people you can swipe right on if you're using the free version. You get 5 super swipes a week, which lets people know you really, really like them. You get 1 spotlight a week, which means your profile gets boosted for 30 minutes. You also get unlimited extends. Bumble only gives you and your match 48 to 72 hours to reply to each other, but with the paid version, you can extend it for 24 hours at a time. You also get unlimited rematch. So if your match expires and you forgot to extend the match, you can rematch with them. If you accidentally swipe left on someone you thought was interesting, Boost gives you the option for unlimited backtrack. Premium is the second tier. It gives you unlimited likes, you can see who liked you. You can also set advanced filters to narrow down who it is you want to see. You can also go incognito mode, which is perfect for cheating on your significant other. You can also do travel mode, which shows you people from outside of your location. You get the super swipes and the spotlight, as well as the extends, rematch, and backtrack, and you also get people recommended to you. Premium Plus is last tier. You get everything I listed before, as well as 2 extra features. People you liked can see you sooner, and you get pushed onto others' feed during optimal times. On each tier, there are several different tiers of prices depending on how long you want to try it out for. For the Boost option, for 1 week, you can pay $9.99 per week. For 1 month, you can pay $19.99 per month, or $4.66 per week. For 3 months, you can pay $39.99 for 3 months, or only $3.11 per week. And for 6 months, you can pay $59.99 for 6 months, or $2.33 per week, which is their best value. Of course, the per week options are their deceptive marketing practices. You have to pay the full amount up front. You can't just pay per week. But wait, there's more. For premium, there's a monthly option, which is $34.99 per month. There's a weekly option, which is $17.99 per week, and it renews every week, so be sure to cancel, of course. There's an option for 3 months up front, and their deceptive marketing prices show you $5.44, but that's per week, which means you end up paying $69.99 for 3 months. And lastly, there's a lifetime option, which means you don't pay anything besides the $199.99 upfront. But wait, there's even more. The Premium Plus options are considerably more expensive, with the monthly option being $49.99 per month, but their deceptive marketing shows you it's only $11.66 per week. Their most popular option is a weekly option, which is $24.99 per week. And the last option is the 3-month option. They tell you it's only $7.78 per week, but that turns out to be $99.99 for 3 months. These are ridiculous prices, by the way. Deceptive marketing practices include, like I said, showing you a cheaper price than what it actually is, and also what got me, which was Bumble showing me a notification whenever I swiped left on someone I didn't like. They tell me you missed a potential match. I would want to rematch with them even if I swiped left on them. They weren't someone that fit who I was looking for, but I wanted that feeling of happiness and success whenever I matched with someone, so I ultimately bought the subscriptions so I could match with those missed matches. Again, though, when I first got a subscription, it was $5 a month. The second time I got it, it was $13 a month, which is still cheaper than the almost $18 a week. I only ever lasted 1 month for each subscription, so I never let it renew, and there was also only ever 1 tier. But clearly, these apps want you to spend these ridiculous prices to find love, so they want you to feel like if you paid them for these features, you'll be more likely to find your one true love. I mean, the unlimited swipes feature lets me know that these paid features are hoping to target desperate people. Desperate people who are more likely to spend more time and more money on the app. Desperate people are ultimately the money makers for these apps. But aside from dating apps wanting you to feel addicted, there are other consequences. Like my friend Rin pointed out in the last episode, and like a 2020 PRC study confirms, men are more likely to feel as though they are not getting enough matches. And like both Rin and the study pointed out, more men than women are on dating apps, with 30% of Americans on dating apps being men, and 28% being women. It's not a big gap, but it's enough of a gap that the men questioned for the study noticed that they weren't getting as much interaction as they thought they would. And the gap varies depending on the age group, though the PRC study does not expand on that. But you're probably thinking, how is this a negative consequence? Well, I've been on the internet long enough to know that falling down a pipeline is concerningly easy. I've talked about incels in the past, and maybe in the future I'll make an entire episode dedicated to them, but they're worth mentioning in this episode. If you don't know what an incel is, I'll tell you. Incel stands for involuntarily celibate, meaning that technically anyone who wants to have sex and be sexually active but can't seem to get laid would be considered an incel. I would have been considered an incel a few years ago, and while I still haven't had sex, I've gotten to the point in my life where I feel like I don't need it. However, a lot of people, and more specifically young men and boys, have a harder time coming to that same conclusion I did. And this is for a lot of reasons. The media portraying men as sex fiends, other boys or men making fun of male virgins, women making fun of male virgins, among other things. And unfortunately, the term incel has been adopted by one of the biggest communities for incels, a forum called incels.co. Don't visit the website, it's very disturbing. This forum, though, not only hosts a space for incel men to come together and vent about society, but over the past several years, this forum has transformed for the worst. Stay with me, I promise I have a point to this. If you browse through the forum, again, highly unrecommended, you'll see that incels on the forum have a set of beliefs that have been adopted by the likes of Andrew Tate and Joe Rogan. Beliefs that tell young boys that women will never be interested in them if they're ugly or not an alpha man or not rich, and thus men have to control women. So if you're a man on a dating app who has been told your whole life that you're worthless if you're a virgin and you're not getting attention on dating apps, you'll be more susceptible to incel propaganda. And you might be thinking, that's ridiculous. Men on dating apps are grown enough to know right from wrong. But the thing with propaganda is it affects everyone, and it's so dangerous because it's so silent. It is especially easy to fall into propaganda when you're a 12-year-old boy who's browsing on the internet in hopes of getting dating advice, and you come across a forum that tells you to hate women and take sex by force. I mean, you yourself have fallen victim to propaganda, and you don't even realize it. That's how easy it is. It's also worth noting that a lot of incels find this particular incel community because their experiences mirror the skewed and biased perspectives of those on the forum. And while those skewed and biased perspectives might be just that, skewed and biased, they're also a foundation for worse thoughts, and it's a pretty solid foundation that has been further solidified through the echo chamber that is incels.co. And dating apps only make that worse and isolate men more, especially if they're seeing so many women talk about their strikingly different experiences on dating apps. And you might be thinking, well, why should I care about incels when they don't care about me? Yes, incels are some of the most vile human beings you will ever come across, but they also started out as someone completely different. If we continue to ignore the big issue that incels are becoming, more and more teen girls will die at the hands of teen boys who have been indoctrinated. But that is a topic for another day, so I'll save my thoughts for another episode. This gap between women on dating apps versus men on dating apps is only increasing, especially with the 4B movement growing in popularity all over the world. Not just 4B movements, but anything adjacent to that. Women are growing tired of being treated like shit by men, and that's been a growing trend over the past few years. I mean, according to another Pew Research Center study, only 38% of single women are looking to date or pursue a relationship, compared to 61% of single men looking to date or pursue a relationship. So the gap will definitely increase over the next few years, at least in my opinion. And of course, this isn't women's fault. In fact, I would say it's the fault of the patriarchy and the men upholding it. Women are bound to get more matches and more flirty messages because that's just how society nowadays works. It's the same reason why women get catcalled and men don't. It's the same reason why men feel pressure to ask women out and women don't. And the Pew Research Center agrees. They conducted another study in 2020 and found that, quote, most women who are currently single and looking to date say they have experienced at least one of 6 harassing behaviors, end quote. They also confirm, quote, women are also more likely to see risk, both physical and emotional, when it comes to dating. When those who say dating has become harder for most people in the last 10 years are asked to describe in their own words why they think this is the case, women are twice as likely as men to cite increased risk. For their part, men are more likely to say technology is a reason dating has gotten harder, end quote. But anyway, I'm not saying that women should stay on dating apps in hopes of making men less likely to go down dangerous pipelines. That responsibility should fall on everyone. If we want incels to be completely eradicated, we have to work together as parents, men, women, authority figures, etc. It's an all hands on deck situation that will keep young kids and grown women safe. Everyone should care about making sure incels don't become a bigger issue. What I am saying is that this is an issue rooted deep in our society that dating apps are only emphasizing. Dating app companies market their apps as the end all be all solution to everyone's dating woes, but dating apps at the same time are not doing enough to attract and keep women on their app, so men inevitably get less interactions on dating apps. Dating apps are so unsafe for women and femme, and neither the Match Group nor any other dating app conglomerate are doing enough to keep them safe. They just don't care enough to do so, it's not worth it to them. And women and femme are more likely to bear the brunt of this negligent approach. Regardless, isolating men and making them believe that no one wants them is not just dangerous for young men and boys, it's also dangerous for women. Let's talk about how dangerous it is for women on dating apps. In December of 2018, in Auckland, New Zealand, British backpacker Grace Millane was murdered by Jesse Kempson, someone Grace matched with on Tinder. She was strangled to death, and she wasn't the only victim of Jesse. Jesse Kempson had a record of violence, and 8 months before killing Grace, he raped another Tinder match after she refused to have sex with him. And this is unfortunately not the only time a man murders a Tinder date. A 51-year-old Nebraskan man named Aubrey Trail was convicted of 24-year-old Cindy Luce's murder in 2017. Him and his girlfriend Bailey Boswell were both tried and convicted of Sydney's murder. And this also doesn't account for the countless women and femme who have been raped, sexually assaulted, and kissed against their will on their dates. It's not a phenomenon that's unique to dating apps, but it happens still. Now, of course, women aren't the only ones who face danger when going on these dates. Men are also vulnerable, though in a different way. In 2015, Alana Rose Jones, a woman from Brisbane, Australia, stabbed a man she matched with on Tinder because he had a girlfriend. And in Melbourne, Australia, a 26-year-old Ghanaian man was stabbed by 3 women after matching with them and meeting up with them to give them a ride. There's also countless other stories of catfishing and scamming that have seemingly been facilitated through dating apps. Meeting up with strangers is just not a good idea regardless of your gender. But ultimately, women do face a higher risk. Something, men are scared women will make fun of them, and women are scared men will kill them, and whatnot. Ultimately, though, the responsibility for keeping all users safe should fall on the dating apps. Like Rin said in the last episode, why is it up to us to vibe check strangers to make sure they're not dangerous people? Obviously, we should all be careful when meeting up with strangers, that goes without saying. But when living in a society that values hyper-independence while also valuing romantic relationships, it can get a little hard to leave dating apps behind, especially with the rise in popularity of said apps. It's getting harder and harder to meet people in real life, especially when a 9-to-5 job is the standard and leaves very little leisure time. Not to mention, people are getting worse at communicating. Let me show you this TikTok.
What is going on with the way men are talking to women these days? Like, let me talk about 3 instances where men are saying the craziest things off rip at women in the clubs. This man walked up to me. We were chit-chatting, small talk. Eventually he asked, "What are you doing after this?" And I said, "I'm going home." It was like 3 in the morning. I go home after the club. He seemed surprised when I said that I'm going home. So I asked him why, like, "Where are you going?" And he goes, if I'm lucky, I'm having sex tonight." Okay, what does that got to do with me? Mind you, this is my first impression of you, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I mean, best of luck tonight. Bye. Like, what makes you think I'm gonna be the one that you have sex with tonight? At that point, I'm like, I'm over this lap. I go find my friend. She's talking to this guy for like an extensive time. I ask her, how did it go? She's like, oh, it was horrible. It was horribly wrong. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What happened? She goes, he said he doesn't care what job his girl has. Mind you, my friend is a doctor. So apparently when he found that out, the words that followed were, I don't care what my woman does for work. All I care about is what her is like. these are the things that men are saying to the women in the club. To top it all off, on my way out the door, going home, mind you, this was like 3:30 a.m. at this point. I'm walking out the door, and on my way out, some guy grabs onto me, and he goes, "Are you gonna go out with me?" Unhand me. What makes you think that that would work on me? As I'm exiting the club, you grab onto me and you just shout at me, "Are you going out with me?" Y'all, I don't know what is going on. I don't think it used to be like this. What happened to hi, how are you? Good evening. Good morning. What is going on?
Women are also having a similar issue of not being able to flirt and communicate, though again, it presents very differently depending on gender. Men are typically quicker to sexualize and scare women, and women are typically more inappropriately mean in their flirting style, but the point stands, people suck at making small talk and flirting in ways that are appropriate for the occasion. You can find a bunch of reasons why, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Unfortunately, I have no reference for how non-binary or other LGBTQ plus folks are doing on dating apps. Like I mentioned in the beginning, the PRC studies don't mention how specifically LGBTQ plus people interact with dating apps. They don't even include trans people in their studies. And though I myself am sapphic, I have not gone on any dates, like I said in my last episode, and I don't tend to talk to my queer friends about their dating lives, but if you are queer and you are on dating apps, let me know how your experiences has been. Though I said in the beginning that this episode won't delve too deep into the psychology, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the negative psychological effects of using dating apps. This is a podcast where I pretend to be a therapist after all. Like I said before, men not getting enough attention can lead them to fall down dangerous pipelines where they feel validated. But not getting enough attention isn't just an issue that affects men, it also affects other genders. The biggest and arguably most obvious negative side effect of not getting enough attention on dating apps is the hit to your self-esteem. Getting shown so many people on whatever dating app you're using, but only matching with a few is bound to make you feel like you're not good enough or like you're too ugly, especially when dating apps prioritize pictures over information. So even if you go on there thinking you don't care about looks, others do. And not only will their profiles reflect that, they'll be sure to choose the best pictures and sometimes won't even bother to fill out the rest of the information on their profile. But if you don't fit the beauty standards of wherever you live, you're likely to get less matches. And you're likely contributing to other people's self-esteem taking a hit. How many times have you passed on someone that fits your criteria but doesn't fit whatever beauty standards you want them to fit? I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. You should choose someone who fits as many criteria as possible and you shouldn't settle. But it's definitely a culture that's growing on dating apps and seeping into other areas of our lives. But that's a topic for another day. Another issue is getting sexualized. Too many people still believe that sexualizing others or receiving sexual messages is the same as getting a compliment. But the fact of the matter is that that's not how that works. Receiving only sexual messages or majority sexual messages can make you feel like you're not worth more than your looks. When you have much more to offer than just your looks, it can make you feel like you're not worth more than an occasional hookup. This can also be a hit to your self-esteem. While having a lot of options on dating apps might seem like the solution to your dating woes, it actually is the opposite. According to a Forbes article titled 3 Fatal Flaws of Online Dating and a Psychologist's Recommendation on How to Overcome Them, ghosting, fading, and orbiting become more popular thanks to the, quote, sheer number of replacements on these apps. Being ghosted can lead you to being distrusting of future people you meet on and off dating apps. Not only that, but feeling like you can easily be replaced can also make you feel like you're not worthy of even a goodbye message, harming your self-esteem even more. Another issue that the Forbes article points out is that a lot of people on dating apps are willing to overlook things that should be deal breakers. And of course, this is something that happens outside of dating apps. There's so many people who ignore red flags in early relationships, which is something I'll touch on in my next episode. But I've talked about this kind of thing before on this episode. Bumble telling me you missed a potential match when I consciously swiped left on someone made me rethink my actions. And only because I wanted more matches, not because I actually thought we'd be compatible. This can lead you to going on dates with people you know wouldn't be a good fit. But you go on these dates anyway, not only because you want to be in a relationship, but also because you're hoping you'll connect and click with this person. But going on these dates that ultimately end up going nowhere can make you feel like you're wasting your time, which can lead to hopelessness and depression. The Pew Research Center asked those they questioned about dating apps what they felt about their experiences. One man, aged 56 at the time of being questioned, answered, quote, "There is a constant influx of new inventory. It's made dating more of a shopping activity, consumerism, than an interpersonal experience, emotional. The swipe right mentality starts to affect us in everyday life," end quote. This is similar to what another friend pointed out. Having too many options feels very impersonal and feels more like a game. It feels like you can't do anything wrong because it's just a game and there's always another person you can message. Suddenly, relationships aren't as personal as they once were. All of this can result in feeling depressed, anxious, feeling like you're not good enough. Dating apps are definitely not good for our mental health. Trust issues are at an all-time high on dating apps if the PRC study is anything to go by. If dating apps make your connections with others feel shallow, then relationships feel unreachable, and loneliness doesn't actually go away. In my experience, deeper connections are the solution to alleviate the feelings of loneliness, but dating apps don't facilitate making deeper connections. It's unviable for dating apps to give you the deeper connections you desire. On the flip side, however, having a screen between you and the person you're trying to court can make you act much differently than you normally would in real life. This can present in many different ways. Maybe you feel better flirting online than you do in person. But Dr. Joanna Orlando, who was interviewed for a BBC article, says, quote, "The screen mediates our courage, so we will do and say things online that we would never do in real life," end quote. Infidelity, abuse, trolling, and sexual harassment are all behaviors that are popular on dating apps. I mean, a whole 42% of users on Tinder are married, according to a group of researchers in the Netherlands and the US. If you've ever sent an unsolicited nude, you've participated in online sexual harassment. If you've ever ghosted someone, you've broken someone's heart and made them feel unworthy, consciously or not. And though you might start out being a nuisance on dating apps only, that behavior will inevitably bleed out into your day-to-day life, according to the BBC article. An opinion piece by Kara Alimo for CNN points out that, quote, "An unprecedented 25% of 40-year-olds have never been married," end quote. And this is according to another study done by the Pew Research Center. She says about dating apps, quote, "Their design prompts people to stay single and even to value the people they date less than they would if they didn't think they had loads of other options on dating apps," end quote. She goes on to further say, quote, "Second, plenty of other research tells us that when people are overwhelmed with choices, they respond by not choosing any of them. When people think they can easily find another romantic partner, they view the one they have less positively and are less committed to them and are more likely to break up with them," end quote. Situationships, ghosting, orbiting, fading, and straight up ignoring are all prevalent on dating apps because of the illusion of choice. If you've ever gone to the store to find, say, milk, chances are you've not only left the store with multiple other items, but you've felt overwhelmed with the amount of different types of milk there are. Same logic applies to dating apps. You stop viewing people on dating apps as people and more as items you can collect, regardless of your intentions when first signing up. This is no one's fault in particular, it's just how the human brain reacts. You have to work extra hard and be extra conscious to see people on dating apps as people. And again, dating apps are doing nothing to discourage this kind of people or items thinking. There's also the issue of letting algorithms decide who gets to come across our screens. This is something I tried to touch on in the last episode, but I didn't articulate my thoughts well enough. I asked, should algorithms decide who we date? And Rin answered very astutely that dating apps don't decide who we date. That ultimately comes down to individual choice. Dating apps just show us who their algorithms believe we'd like the most. But that is also an issue in my opinion. I'm not sure I have a better solution because meeting people in real life is getting more difficult, like I said. And dating apps show you people you might have never crossed paths with, something that can be both a pro and a con. But algorithms change and evolve depending on the financial needs of the app. As the lawsuit I talked about before claims, dating apps under the Match Group have changed their algorithms to make their users feel addicted to the app they're using. They have gamified the dating scene. This can happen through a couple of different ways, at least in my own personal experience. First is showing you the number of likes you have received. This is a feature that can be seen with Bumble and Tinder and Her, and reminds me of achievements you've accomplished on games. Each app has a red badge above the likes button, which motivates you to click on it. You want to click on it to get rid of the badge and to see who liked you. But you can't get rid of it unless you pay for a subscription tier that lets you view and review people who liked you. It creates a sense of excitement, especially when you see the numbers rise, but that excitement turns into frustration when you realize you can't see who liked you unless you pay. And then that frustration motivates you to either delete the app or purchase an overpriced subscription. This is how people like me decide buying a subscription is not a bad idea. It feels worth it because among those likes could be the perfect person for us. The second way I found dating apps make you feel more and more addicted to them is by occasionally matching you up with someone. It keeps you swiping in hopes that the next person they show you is someone who also liked you. This reminds me of spin to win loot boxes on video games. They want you to spend in-game currency, something that's only obtained through spending real life money, and they'll give you a reward each time you spin, something to keep you on your toes and keep spinning in hopes of getting the biggest prize. But again, how does that affect the people we meet? If algorithms want us glued to our screens, they're not going to show us the best options. But if those are the only options we can see, especially in our increasingly busy society, how do we know that we're not missing out on actual gems that we could meet in our day-to-day lives? Alternatively, how many gems did we meet in our day-to-day lives that we passed on because they couldn't find a way to appropriately flirt? Again, I'm not sure I can confidently say that you should get rid of dating apps altogether. Unfortunately, dating apps have cemented themselves in our day-to-day lives. They're a very convenient way of being able to talk to others, and they're a safer way of meeting people for certain communities. It would be ignorant of me to tell everyone to delete their dating apps when a lot of LGBTQ+ people use dating apps because it's just not safe for them to put themselves out there publicly. Even though dating apps that are catered to LGBTQ+ people will succumb to capitalism, apps like Grindr and Her are not much different from Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, it is infinitely safer for a trans person to meet someone on a dating app catered to them than it is to just hang out at a coffee shop and wait for either the perfect partner or a danger. LGBTQ+ people who were questioned for the PRC study agree with that too. When asking various groups of people whether they think dating apps were safe or dangerous, 65% of LGBT people said dating apps were safe, and 34% said dating apps were unsafe. This was in comparison to 52% of straight people saying dating apps were safe, and 47% saying dating apps were dangerous. A lot of disabled people also use dating apps because it's unrealistic for them to meet people outside of their homes. Not to mention, every day there are new people signing up for or returning to a dating app that promises to find the perfect person for them. But every day, algorithms pick out the worst matches in hopes to get them to buy a subscription. And even if they do buy a subscription, there's no guarantee that they'll get shown better matches, just more. Bumble has a weekly subscription option. Not only are they hoping that you forget to cancel your subscription before it automatically renews, but what's to keep them from showing you worse people in hopes of keeping you subscribed? The way their subscription features are set up make you believe that if you buy into them, they'll show you better matches. But the reality is they're not showing you better matches. They're just showing you more people. And sure, seeing more people in your area could potentially increase the possibility of you coming across someone who is serious about dating and who fits most or all of your criteria. But like I said before, even if you are shown more people, chances are the apps you're using are hiding the people you'd be the most compatible with. You'd have to swipe through every member the app has to show you in order to truly get a shot at finding someone compatible with you. But like was shown with Bumble's tier system, you have to pay for unlimited swipes. It's also just unrealistic to swipe on your phone all day in hopes of finding your one true love, especially when the apps you entrust to make that job easier for you don't have your best interests at heart and don't want to make it easier for you. So what do? Well, unfortunately, the root of the issues we face with dating apps are rooted deep in society. Not only is capitalism the default and companies value money more than anything, but also everywhere you look, romance and the expectation for you to be in a relationship are being shoved in your face. At the same time, however, you're being told that if you don't work yourself into an early grave, you're an awful employee and don't deserve a raise. Certain communities can't date the old fashioned way without putting themselves in immense danger. And to top it off, the most convenient way for you to communicate with others is through downloading apps that want you glued to your phone. This, as I said before, has caused people to just not know how to interact with each other anymore. Literacy and media literacy rates are down. What about meism is rampant on social media. And yes, don't worry, that's getting its own episode soon. Inappropriate jokes are seen as appropriate. People feel okay to wear shorts to a job interview. Deer girls and brown sugar girls look identical to each other. Everyone is only worried about themselves. Things are changing, and there's not much we can do about it as individuals. After all, society was never meant to be hyper individualistic. We can't solve big issues as individuals. So, how can we change? Well, the most important thing is to prioritize friendships and decenter relationships. Recognize that you genuinely don't need a relationship. This may sound like the 4B movement, but the reality is a lot of people on dating apps could benefit from hearing that. A lot of users on dating apps are there because they're uncomfortable being single. And this message isn't just directed towards women like the 4B movement is, it's directed towards every other gender too. If you feel unworthy unless you're in a relationship, get to the root of that and work to dismantle that. Be sure that you're aware on dating apps. Be aware of your own limitations, your own biases, and how addicted you're becoming to these apps, and proceed accordingly. If you must delete the apps for your own mental health, it's best to do so. I'm someone who feels dread whenever I go on dating apps, even if it's just me on Bumble BFF, so I tend to stay away. It's also important to recognize propaganda when you're being fed it, and I'm not talking about political propaganda. Propaganda comes in all shapes and sizes, anything from tabloids following celebrities' romantic relationships closely to movies and TV shows implying that the only way you feel whole is by being in a relationship. That's all propaganda. You should boycott entertainment shows that tell you about the most intimate details of a celebrity's romantic relationships, even if it's just to save your own mental health. Disengage with content about your favorite influencers talking about their romantic endeavors. This is why you'll see Americans struggling to make friends abroad. Americans are told to prioritize romantic relationships over friendships. We don't know how to make and keep friends. Our friendships are pretty superficial, and a lot of people I've met think friendships are more boring than a romantic relationship. In my experience, however, friendships can get pretty exciting, and if you're doing it right, you'll feel less alone than even being in a relationship. As a human, you need a strong group of friends where you can feel safe sharing your emotions, ranting, listening, and doing other things that you could never do with a romantic partner. The best way to combat this feeling of loneliness is to get yourself involved in your community. This may sound harder than it actually is, and it might feel scary, but it's as easy as talking to your neighbor. Knock on your neighbor's door and ask them what their name is and if there's anything they need. Of course, this is also made hard if you live in an area full of people that worship guns and who will shoot anyone who steps on their lawn, so be careful and be aware of where you live, especially if you're a person of color. But getting in touch with your neighbors is the best way to form friendships with people you can cook with or visit during the holidays. Go to your church, your library, town hall meetings, sit at a cafe or a bar and just read. Go on your local subreddit and ask if anyone knows of any good places to go to make friends. But go to these places with the goal of making friends, not getting into a relationship. It might be hard if you live in a small town or if you don't have a car and public transportation sucks. It's going to be harder if you're disabled, but if you're willing to travel to go to a date, you should also be willing to travel to make friends. Even if it's not constant, getting out of your house and being around your local community will help you learn more about it. It also goes without saying to be safe while doing this. If you live in a super red area and you're visibly queer or you're a person of color, you might be safer sticking with dating apps or making online friends until you can move to a safer place or until your area becomes safer for you, but I digress. One of the core issues is that people want a relationship to fulfill emotional needs that could easily be fulfilled with having friends. Having and making friends is the easiest way to wean you off of dating apps, especially if you have and keep close friends that you can cuddle with or otherwise be touchy with if you're someone who feels touch starved constantly. It sounds cliche too, but put your phone down. Sure, less and less people know how to communicate in real life, but communication skills aren't getting any better on TikTok or Tinder or Bumble. At least in person, you're able to read body language better and vibe check the people you come into contact with better, something you can't really do on dating apps. You don't have to go to extremes, you don't have to withhold sex, you don't have to quit dating altogether, you don't have to fall into the 4B movement, which, according to Koreans, is transphobic and doesn't actually work. No surprise there, we live in a society that values relationships, and even women who want to commit to the 4B movement still have hope they'll find a good man. In fact, I have another TikTok to show you that touches on that.
This is why things don't get better across the board for women, because all women are not willing to stand with all women. I want to join the 4B movement, but I still want to date. Like, I want to support it, but I still want to date men, and I'll make sure he's an ally. Just because you think that you will find the needle in the haystack, you will be the special one that finds this unicorn of a man who doesn't exist, is delusional. Women have been spoon-fed the idea that they want romance, that they will be fulfilled by romance, that romance is attainable, and all of that falls flat when they come to reality. I've talked about this so many times that romance is not going to save you. Romance is not going to make you feel safe and protected. It is your community that is going to make you feel safe and protected, and men oftentimes do not invest into community. I think this begs a deeper question where, why do you want to date men? What do you think men have to offer that you can't get from friends and community and family? And if it's sex, then that's telling me that sex is more important to you than your own rights. And I will never be able to understand that logic. When you are part of a movement, it is for something greater than yourself, and I think a lot of times people just become selfish and they don't want to give up their simple pleasures for the greater good.
I don't know much about the 4B movement, and I don't agree with everything that creator says on her platform, so I can't comment much more on that, but it might be something you should look into if you're looking to join the 4B movement. Again, though, it's unnecessary and not necessarily what I'm advocating for. What I am advocating for is that you do have to keep in mind that dating apps want you on there. They're going to show you the worst possible matches. You'll be met with people that you wouldn't have met otherwise, and that comes with all the consequences of meeting strangers. Some will be some of the most amazing people you will ever meet, but most will not fit your vibe, and dating apps don't care about that. They don't care about your physical safety. It's sad when you think about Bumble. Bumble started out as an app that catered to women and kept women's safety in mind. Women were the first ones to make a move, removing the possibility of getting a dick pic before even getting a chance to say hello. I mean, Bumble detects dick pics and blurs them out and warns you before opening up the picture. However, after Match Group sued the founders of Bumble, who were ex-employees of Tinder, Match Group bought out Bumble, forever changing it for the worst. It's now owned by a group that has facilitated the murder of several women. And listen, I'm not saying that Tinder is directly responsible for the murders, rapes, and sexual assaults of these women, but one could make the argument that Tinder definitely made it easier for these men to find vulnerable women that they otherwise wouldn't have come across. Tinder also hasn't improved or added safety measures for victims of scamming and catfishing. Not even Bumble. They allow users with unverified profiles on there and then tell you to ask the user to verify their profile. Every day there's a new case of someone who was scammed by someone they met on a dating app. And again, dating apps don't care about that. They only care enough to keep their stocks up, but not much more than that, at least in my opinion. But that is the story of every dating app that started out with great intentions. Money talks and money wins. Now more than ever, it's important to let our money speak. If money talks and money wins, we should use our money to leverage better conditions for ourselves. And this goes for anything and everything outside of dating apps. Yes, human connection is important, but in my opinion, human connection is worth more when it's made without the interference of companies hoping to get more money out of you each year. It might be unrealistic to completely get rid of dating apps for good anytime soon, especially for specific communities, like I previously mentioned, but it's also unrealistic to expect to find true love on an app that shows you the least compatible people. Not only that, but we should continue trying to improve our communication skills. Those are invaluable skills that we should all have and hone. Though dating apps show you people that you maybe would have never crossed paths with otherwise, they also show you people that you probably wouldn't date even if you did cross paths with them. It's important to protect your own mental health and delete the apps if you notice you're spending more time on them than you do on other social media apps. I mean, a high screen time on either isn't good, but at least social media apps don't give you false hope to try to get you to buy something from them. Additionally, only 54% of Americans believe that finding a long-term relationship is just as likely to occur on dating apps as meeting someone outside of dating apps. And like I mentioned previously, only 12% of Americans on dating apps have actually found a long-term relationship through the dating apps, which is probably the reason why hookup culture is so prevalent. But is your mental health worth the optimistic 50-50 chance you might have at finding a long-term relationship, or the only 12% chance you realistically have at meeting a long-term partner? That is something that you have to discern for yourself. But anyway, let me know what you guys think about this topic. Before I end this episode off, I wanted to ask you guys to give me feedback on how I can improve my channel. I tried to ask on Reddit, and there was great advice on there that I've tried to implement on this episode, but there were also a lot of mean comments. But anyway, let me know if you like the changes that I implemented on this video. If you're watching, obviously you guys are the ones that are actively watching my channel, and I value your opinions just a little bit more than people on Reddit who haven't watched any of my videos in full, or who will call me bitchy when I reply to mean comments, or who just don't understand why people would watch or listen to videos that are over an hour long. I also want to apologize for the late uploads recently, and if I seem off in this episode, I posted on my YouTube community tab, and I told you guys in the beginning of this episode that I recently suffered a concussion, and it's been really difficult dealing with the symptoms. I filmed this episode previously twice, but I was so out of it both times, so this is my third time refilming it. I've also just been struggling with my mental health because of the concussion symptoms, but I'm trying to get my life back to normal. I also want to thank you guys for watching or listening if you are, and I hope you had a great Thanksgiving if you celebrated. If you didn't, let me know what you did instead. I know a lot of people don't celebrate Thanksgiving because of the history of it, which is super valid. And also some of my viewers are in Canada and they celebrate Thanksgiving at a different time. But regardless, I wanted to thank you guys, and I wanted to let you guys know that I'm super grateful for all of you and all of the comments that I receive. And yeah, let me know what other topics I should cover and what you think about this particular topic. And I will see you guys hopefully next week, but I can't really promise anything with how my symptoms are. Anyway, thank you for listening and spending time with me. Bye!